Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience on antidepressants, and my experience was very negative. So I just want to preface this video by saying I didn't have a good experience. If you are on antidepressants or considering going on antidepressants, obviously this is just my personal experience. I know they're really good for some people, but they weren't very good for me. So if watching this is not going to be helpful, then please don't watch it. I'm also going to be covering things like I'm going to talk about OCD, I'm going to be talking about depression, I'm going to be talking about eating disorders, I'm going to be talking about self harm. So there's going to be quite a lot of content that isn't particularly nice. So if you're sensitive to any of that, then again, maybe don't watch. And Mila will be here for the duration. So hopefully you don't mind that either. So I had an article come out with the BBC this morning about my experience on antidepressants and the negative side effects that I experienced on them. So I wanted to go into a little bit more context because obviously that is quite a short article. So I was put on them at 16 years old. I've got my little notepad here just in case you're wondering what I'm looking at. I was put on them at 16 years old for OCD. So I was diagnosed with OCD when I was 15, I believe. And it was a severe form of OCD. And the OCD that I have is routine and ritual based. So I do certain routines, I do certain rituals, and I have certain compulsions that I need to carry out to keep people I love safe, to keep myself safe, to stop people from getting ill, to stop people from dying. It's that kind of OCD. Obviously, there's loads of different types, but that's the type that I have. And I had been going to therapy for quite a while, and I'd been doing exposure therapy for OCD, but it wasn't really helping. It was helpful, but I wasn't in a very good place at that time. So 15, 16, 17. I was very, very low. I just was having an awful time of it, really. I wasn't really eating. I think obviously part of OCD is it's control, and it's trying to keep things safe, and it's trying to keep everything the same. So OCD and eating disorders are really closely linked because they are both forms of control and forms of trying to keep yourself safe through controlling sort of external factors like the routines that you do or what you eat, that kind of stuff. So I wasn't having a very good time, and I went to a psychiatrist, and she was like, go on these tablets and they'll take the edge off, they'll make you feel better. And I was like, you know what, that sounds fantastic. At that point I sort of thought, give me anything, because I am exhausted. Trying to be a 16-year-old is like hard enough anyway, let alone having OCD, going to therapy every week, trying to stop doing all of these rituals that you're doing, the anxiety that comes with that. I was just exhausted. So I was at a point where I thought, give me anything and I'll take it. And if it makes me feel better, fantastic. And I was sort of told, obviously, it can help. Obviously, that's what the evidence suggests, and it's going to be helpful, it's going to be beneficial. So I was like, sign me up. So I took my first dose on the 19th of November 2016, and I made quite meticulous notes about all of this, obviously, because I've got OCD and I really like specific details. So I made a lot of notes. And I was put on 50 milligrams to start with, which I think is the introductory dose. And I didn't really have any side effects, and they didn't really do anything. So I was like, well, this isn't helping me because they haven't done anything. So went back, said that because you get reviews when you're on the medication. So she was like, we'll put you up to a higher dose. So on the 14th of December, I was put on 100 milligrams. So that wasn't even a month later. It was less than a month later that my dose doubled. And at this point, I wasn't actually eating. Like I was checking all my notes, and I just would go through the day and I wouldn't eat. So my cognitive function and my capacity and my ability to sort of self-regulate was out the window because I wasn't eating. So I was in such a hole of just feeling horrendous. And interestingly enough, one of the side effects of SSRIs or antidepressants is anorexia or eating disorders. You can get an eating disorder from being on antidepressants. It's a side effect which is listed, which depression is also a side effect of antidepressants. Suicidal ideation, also a side effect of antidepressants, but it's kind of another thing. And as well to mention, at this time, I was also burning my arm every single day. Now, one of the problems with OCD is that it's kind of like an addiction, and you can get addicted to doing things because you think it keeps the world safe. And at that point, once I did something twice, I made it a routine. So I would have hours and hours and hours every single day of doing these routines, trying to keep people safe, basically. And so once I burnt myself once, that then became a routine. So it was an OCD ritual for me to burn my arm with straighteners, by the way. So I would get ready for school, I would straighten my hair, I would straighten my arm, and then I'd go to school. And that was my routine. So it wasn't even it was about the burning, but it was about the fact that my OCD brain was like, you can't not do that. You have to do that. So I was also doing that every single day, as well as not really eating, as well as having all of these rituals and just feeling horrendous, and also the dose of this medication going up. And I made a note on the 4th of January 2017 that the burning wasn't doing it for me anymore, because you do get a release of adrenaline, dopamine, whatever it is, when you do that kind of thing. It does feel like a little bit of a high. It's a very twisted high, but it is a high. So obviously it was giving me something, basically. But the burning wasn't really doing it for me anymore. So I started cutting my arm with a knife on the 4th of January 2017, I've made a note of. And I can remember writing that I did it because I wanted to feel something. Because you get into such a state of disassociation and feeling so numb that you will do anything to feel something. So injuring yourself is a feeling. And so that was the only feeling that I could get at the time. So I was craving emotion, and that is what I was doing to get the emotion, which, if you don't understand, you don't understand. I hope no one does. But that was my logic. That was why I was doing it. But the funny thing is, the antidepressants effectively numb you. They effectively remove emotion. So you're removing the good and you're removing the bad. So you feel better, but it's because you feel less. And then on the 5th of January 2017, I'm not laughing, it's not funny, it's just a thing. I smashed a mirror and then used a mirror to cut my arm instead, because the knife wasn't very sharp, because the knives in the house weren't very sharp. So I used a mirror again to try and feel something. And then on the 20th of January, I go back to the psychiatrist. She is aware of all of these things that I'm doing, and she's like, let's up the dose again. So I am then up to 150 milligrams of this antidepressant, because I was cutting myself and burning myself. But I was cutting and burning myself to feel emotion, and the medication got increased, which caused less emotion. So my motive for self-harming was getting increased, because I'm trying to do it to feel something. This medication is making me feel less. So I will continue to do the thing that's giving me emotion more, because the need for it is greater, because I'm feeling less on the medication. So effectively, looking back on it, I didn't think this at the time, but looking back on it, the medication was actually fueling the need for me to hurt myself. And I wasn't aware of this because I didn't really have enough information about what I was taking. But that was effectively what was happening. And that kind of was a continuing theme. And then being on this 150 milligrams, I was just numb to the world. I was in such a dissociated state. I don't really know what was going on. I felt despair and not really anything else, because I was so numb to everything, because the dose was so high, and because I was doing all of these horrible things. I was just felt like I was floating through. I wasn't present. I wasn't in it. I wasn't anything. So then on the 1st of February 2017, I overdosed on ibuprofen, because that was the only thing that I could find, because I was 16 and I didn't take drugs. So I overdosed on ibuprofen and nothing happened because I barely took any. Then on the 8th of February, I did the same thing again, but I took more, and then ambulance was called, did checks, I was fine. It's important to preface as well that I was in such a state of not knowing what was going on. I didn't really know what I was doing because I was so numb to everything. I was in a very irrational state. And then on the 27th of February, I overdosed for a third time. And this time I took way too many. It was paracetamol this time. I took a lot of paracetamol, and then ambulance was called. I had to go to hospital, and then I was hospitalized because I'd taken so many. And obviously at this point, I wasn't eating very well. My eating was very poor. So I was quite small. I've always been, I was very tall and very skinny basically because I wasn't eating. So my liver, I really put my liver through it to have all of that medication in one go, basically. So I was hospitalized. I had to have my stomach pumped, which didn't work because I'd taken so many. And so I had to have a procedure to basically cleanse and flush out your liver because of all the toxins from the medication. So I had that. That also didn't work well enough because I'd taken so many. So I had to have that done again. This was over the course of a couple of days. And the doctor said to me that if the second procedure didn't work, I would have to go on the transplant list for a new liver because it was that severe. Obviously, at this point, I was in a state of absolute, I've never felt anything like it. It was just hell on earth. It was awful. Horrendous, horrendous thing. And obviously, being in hospital at 16, I was on the children's ward. And I can remember walking through with my little, because obviously I had tubes coming out of everywhere, with my little trolley thing with all my tubes. And I was walking through this area where the kids that are there for a really long time basically get to play. I can remember seeing this one girl who had no hair, and she was probably 6 or 7. So I'm assuming she had cancer, and she was sort of a patient, had been a patient for a long time. And she was playing, and I thought, I've made a decision to come here. She hasn't. She is here and she can't leave because she's so ill. I have done something to put myself here, and I will probably go home in a couple of days and I will be able to recover. So I felt like it was a very selfish thing for me to have done, to put myself in there. And I thought, I do not want to take the resources that could be used for these kids that are really, really sick and need the resources. And that was I'm never doing this again. And I never did it again because of that little girl. So that's a little side note. But I ended up coming out. And obviously, you have to go through a psychiatric assessment to be able to get out if you've gone in on an overdose. And because I had a therapist and because I was on this medication and I had a psychiatrist, they sort of let me go under the knowledge that I would be in continuing therapy. So then I went home and made some changes, and I still burnt myself for a while, still cut myself for a while. Eating still wasn't great, still had OCD. I still have OCD now, and it's like 10 years later. But I came out of there. And then I basically decided to reduce the dose of my medication because I had been so out of it and because I'd done that, because I was so numb to the world and effectively dead to the world, I thought, I can't risk that happening again. So I'm going to lower the dose, which I did. And then I spent a few years just cruising on that dose whilst continuing to have therapy because I was too scared to come off it, and I didn't know how I'd be if I wasn't on it. And then it got to the end of 2020, and I started doing some research into antidepressants and research into how effective they were, what they actually did, basically whether it was worth me being on them or not, because obviously I'd had a negative experience, but I was too scared to come off them. So I started doing some research and decided that I wanted to come off them very slowly, because you can get really bad withdrawal symptoms from antidepressants, especially if you've been on them for a few years. So you have to wean yourself off them like a medication that you're addicted to, basically. So I then spent a year, which was quite a long time in hindsight, weaning myself off this medication and lowering the dose really, really slowly over the space of a few months. I'd drop it back down again, and then a few months, drop it down further until it got to a point where I was on such a low dose that it was pointless me being on them. So then I came off them. And the 22nd of November 2021, I came off them completely. And even though I had weaned my dose down, coming off them was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it put me in a state of despair like nothing I'd ever experienced before. The 24th of November, so 2 days of not having taken them, I was getting the washing out of the washing machine, like kneeling, pulling it out. And all of a sudden, I just start sobbing, absolutely bawling my eyes out for no reason whatsoever. I just felt like I was falling into a black hole that I would never, ever, ever come out of. And I've never experienced anything like that before or since. And that was just my brain coming off the meds, basically. And it was like that for a little bit. And then I got used to it and my body adjusted to not being on them. And then I was okay. And I will never go back on them. I personally did not like them. I am someone who feels emotion very, very deeply. And I need to feel emotion in order to feel like myself and in order to feel like a human being. So if I'm on something that numbs my emotion, even though it's numbing the bad, it's also numbing the good. And I need to feel the good as fully as possible in order to have any chance of being relatively okay, because I need it. I need to look at things and feel joy. I need to feel that euphoria. I don't need that to be dampened. So now I just manage my mental health through therapy, through the mindfulness work that I do, things like meditation, exercise, all of those, all of the things that you could think of that could help mental health, I do, bar the medication, because it just personally doesn't work for me, which I found quite difficult at the start, that it wasn't working, because I thought if the medication doesn't work and it's supposed to work, then what on earth is going to help me? I'm just incurable. I'm going to be miserable forever, which isn't the case. I have my days, but I would so much rather feel horrendous and feel absolute ecstatic joy. I need the spectrum of emotion personally. So that's my experience on antidepressants, the good and the bad. And it's just my personal experience, but I know there are people that have shared a similar experience, and it feels quite lonely and quite isolating to have this experience. So if you have had a similar experience, then please let me know, because I think there is comfort in numbers quite a lot of the time. And if you take them and they work for you, amazing, because whatever works is fantastic. But unfortunately, they didn't work for me and I didn't have a very good time on them. And I think it's important to discuss that. So thank you for listening. I hope you're okay. I hope you have a good day and a good week. And I will see you very soon.